It's a month now since Terry Waite stepped out of an RAF plane into a gale at Lynham, free after nearly 5 years held hostage in Lebanon. He said then he wanted to answer the questions that remain about his role in the hostage crisis. Until now, he's only hinted at how he suffered. Can you remember how you spent last Christmas?
I can remember it very well indeed. It was my first Christmas for some years in company, because I'd been moved in with John McCarthy, fine companion, Terry Anderson and Tom Sutherland. And I, in fact, was pretty ill. I'd had a bronchial complaint, and I really did not feel well at all. And in captivity, we were never allowed a pencil and paper at all. But we asked for one on Christmas Day. And the guard came in and stood over Terry Anderson as he got the side of a cardboard box and made a game of Scrabble. And the guard stood there while Terry was writing out the letters and making the Scrabble board. And on Christmas afternoon, we played Scrabble. Good Christmas Day. And then we switched on the radio, and this is about the first time I'd had a radio, because in solitary, apart from just a few weeks, I had no radio. And got the Queen's Christmas message. And the Queen, in her Christmas message, mentioned hostages and asked that they be remembered. And I can't tell you how much that meant.
Can I take you further back to January 1987? When was the moment at which you ceased to be a hostage negotiator and became in fact a hostage yourself?
I think I went to meet the captors at the flat of a medical doctor in Beirut, where I'd met them before. And I was sitting in the room, and he received a telephone call. And he told me that there he had to go to an emergency at the hospital. I stayed alone in this apartment. I heard the lift coming up, and my contact came into the room, the person with whom I'd been negotiating. I went down with him, down in the lift, into the deserted street outside. It was raining. It was dark. We got into the car and drove off into the night. I was taken. We went to an apartment in southern Lebanon, and I was then the subject to a total change of clothes and close examination in order to see if I was carrying anything that might have been able to indicate where I was located.
That's a very detailed physical examination.
Absolutely.
How detailed?
Well, probe any scars on your body, look at your head, examine your teeth. I mean, had there been anything, of course, I mean, one would have been killed on the spot. No question about that. And then I was told to wait. Now, at this point, there was still a chance that I would get to see the hostages. It wasn't clear at that point whether they were going to keep me or not. And I knew there'd be a day or so of waiting, because one wouldn't go straight to them. I was then transferred to another room and lay down on a couch, and I actually slept for a while. I was pretty tired by this time. And then they came and again blindfolded me. Every time one moved, of course, one had to be blindfolded. And I was put in the back of a van and taken and driven into a garage, got out of the van, and there was a trap door in the floor. They lifted it out, told me to step down. I stepped on top of a wardrobe and then had to jump down. And it was an underground prison, of which there are many in the Middle East and many, many in Lebanon. And a huge iron door with a grill in it. They opened this door and pushed me inside, and it was a tiled cell. And I sat down and I knew that was it.
In that first year, They thought you were an American spy. So how did they treat you? In what circumstances were you kept? How big was the room? Were you chained? Were you blindfolded? How did they treat you?
For the first few days in this cell, I had to try and steel myself for what I knew would be an ordeal. And so I made to myself 3 vows. No regrets, no sentimentality, no self-pity. I said I'm going to stick by those through this ordeal. In this underground cell, which I could hardly stand up in, I just walked around it. I could walk, but I had to walk stooping. I wasn't chained at that point. And then I was moved to an apartment. Apartments are used a lot, or were used a lot, for hostages. And I was chained hand and feet. I had to lie on the floor in a fetal position, and was blindfolded, of course. And was like that for months. No exercise. Food tended to be sandwiches, cheese sandwiches, jam sandwiches. I don't want to see many more sandwiches in my life.
And contact with other human beings?
No. Nobody. I didn't see or speak to anybody beyond my interrogators for 4 years.
Sleep?
Yes, I slept. Sometimes I slept very well. Sometimes one was not able to sleep well because part of the interrogation technique was to wake me at 2 or 3 in the morning. At least I assumed it was 2 or 3 in the morning. It seemed like it. I had no watch, of course. Any personal possessions, everything was taken away.
So what methods did they use?
They, as I've already said, would wake me in the middle of the night. They beat me with cable on the soles of my feet, which is very painful. I don't recommend it. They subjected me to a mock execution. One day, the guard came into the room, and he said, "You have 5 hours to live." And that was that.
What was going through your mind?
Well, I thought, I'm sorry to go in this way. I'm sorry for my family, for those I love. But I've done the right thing. I had no regrets about what I'd done. They then said, you can write a final letter. And so I said, I want to write 7 letters. I want to write 1 to the Archbishop of Canterbury. I want to write to my wife. I want to write to my children. I want to write to my friends. And they said, you can write 1 letter. So I wrote the most extraordinary letter to all these people combined. And said, no regrets. You've done what's right. And I'm just sorry to leave you in circumstances like this. And they then said, do you want anything? I said, I'd like a cup of tea. Because I'd experienced that extraordinary phenomenon of what I'd read about in books, one's throat going dry. That was just fear. They brought me a cup of tea. And then they said, stand up. I could stand up because I'd been unchained. They said, face the wall. So I did. And then they took out I could feel a pistol against my head because I was blindfolded. They said, anything more to say? I said, nothing. I said my prayers. They let me say my prayers. And then they put the gun down later. And they walked out, and that was the end of the interrogation. They never interrogated me further, apart from mine, I think.
You hinted when you came back that while you were a captive, You were caught up in these endless battles for Beirut, caught up in the shell fire and so on.
Yeah. Yes. I think I was one of the few hostages to be kept in Beirut during the very heavy firing. There may have been one or two others, but many were shipped down to the south. And I was in an apartment in Beirut throughout. And it was, at first, an extraordinarily alarming experience because, I mean, if I can describe it to you, a dark room with metal sheets over the windows and masking tape put down the side of the sheet so that no ray of sunlight can enter, and a staple driven in the wall with a short chain fastened round this leg and padlocked. And you sit there and you hear outside explosions and you know that shells are whizzing over and there's nothing you can do. Nothing that you can do. After a while, you actually do get accustomed to it. On one occasion, one extraordinary occasion, they unchained me and moved me from the room because the shell firing was getting pretty hot and shells were landing in front of the apartment. Moved me into the bathroom, put a blanket in the bath, asked me to get in. They chained my feet then around the taps. And as I lay there was a tremendous explosion and a shell made a direct hit on the apartment next to us. And I could hear people shouting and screaming and crying. All the nastiness that one associates with that type of warfare. And I thought, how tragic. And then I smiled and said, well, this is the hottest bath I've had in a long time.
How did they move you around when they moved you?
Oh, we were all moved in a variety of ways. I mean, I had one extraordinary experience in the early days. They came and they dressed me as a woman. Can you believe it? I'm 6'7" and bearded. But of course they...
not a very convincing one.
Not a very beautiful one either. They, of course, covered my head completely. And long black gowns. I was dressed as a Islamic woman. But the other occasion was much more alarming. They tried to get me into an ottoman, you know, the folding lid type thing. We called it an ottoman when I was a child. I know what you would call it, a large chest. Large chest. And they couldn't get me in because my knees were sticking out. So they puzzled. And then someone had a bright idea. He opened a large fridge and emptied everything out of the fridge. I said, get in there. Well, they just unplugged it, and the thing was all frosted inside, so I got in, and they taped me up first. Tape round the legs, tape round the hands, tape round the mouth, so that I was literally like a mummy, and then shoved into the fridge. So, and then they closed the door. I can tell you the light does go out. But when I got in there, I mean, it was pretty awful, because it began to get so hot. I managed to get my hands free and then push the seal on the fridge so that I could get some air. Otherwise, I think I would have suffocated.
These are moments of fear and despair, but most of the time must have been incredibly boring. What did you do all the time? How did you keep sane?
Well, the 4 years of total isolation, apart from interrogation, a long time. At first, I mean, one's possessions were nothing. In the winter, a pair of pajamas. In the summer, a pair of shorts and a vest. A Bible. They gave me a Bible. And I read that through several times and found the message of the Bible to be, oh, one sees it in a new light. Utterly penetrating, very difficult, very difficult. I think even in my studies I'd taken it too superficially because it penetrates you with the truth about human nature. And in captivity, you have to learn to live by the truth. of yourself. You have to learn that. If you can't live by truth in solitary, you wither and die within.
So you had the Bible, but you must have lived a life of the imagination as well. Tell me, what did you dream about? What did you fantasize about? What was the picture that appeared most often in your mind?
In my dreams, it was remarkable, really, because family and friends whom I deeply cared for actually came to me in my dreams. My dreams were a great source of comfort. I didn't have nightmares. At least, I don't recollect having them at all. I found my dreams to be enormously sustaining. What I tried to do was to, one might say, make friends with my unconscious and allow my unconscious to come to my aid in circumstances where it was the only way in which I could survive, by depending on it. And that happened. Of course, there were times, one can't live with that degree of intensity all the time. One has to have escapes. I did a lot of mental arithmetic, sometimes spending about 3 days on one particular mental problem, which involved memorizing a great string of numbers and proving this, that, and the other. I wrote a novel in my head, or more than one novel. I wrote my autobiography several times, which I tell you is pretty boring, not worth reading. I did all those sort of things. And to keep one mentally alive, what's what you have to do? One has to keep mentally and spiritually alive in that situation.
You said earlier that you had a difficult time in that first year because your captors thought you might have been an American spy. And they did have some grounds of suspicion, because we now know that while you were negotiating for the hostages' release, behind the scenes, arms were being traded for hostages in what became known as the Iran-Contra affair, masterminded by Colonel Oliver North, a man you met on a number of occasions and had dealings with. What did you make of him?
Well, first of all, Colonel North, of course, was the principal representative of the American administration in the hostage affair. He was the one who was dealing with that. And so one was obliged to work in relationship with him, as one was obliged to work in relationship with a large number of other people. That's the first thing to say. And insofar as we were dealing with American hostages, as well as others, we had to relate to the American church, and that's how we came into contact with the American administration. Colonel North, I think, is a man who, if one was a soldier, would be a good companion as a soldier. I think he's a brave man in many respects. I totally and entirely disagree with the policy that he followed.
You said when you came back you wanted the opportunity to answer the questions that have been raised by the Iran-Contra affair. And I suppose the most serious question is, did you know? Did you know, or did you suspect that arms were being traded for hostages?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Would it have made a difference?
It would have made it, certainly.
I mean, you had this overriding objective to release these hostages. Almost, some of your friends have said, almost an obsession.
Mm-hmm.
Would it have made a difference if so honourable an end required means of that kind? Would it have made a personal difference to you?
I have never, ever condoned the policy of paying ransom for hostages, be that in terms of money or in terms of arms. And had I the slightest knowledge of that, I would have had to pull out immediately. Why did I stay in and why did I go back? I went back for very clear reasons, because I had made a commitment to the hostages. And when the rug pulled from under my feet, as it was, when the whole arms business came to light, and I can repeat, I knew absolutely nothing about that, I still felt obliged to go back out of my concern for them.
But this was often, in fact, nearly always, orchestrated by Colonel North. He'd call you up and say something along the lines of, "Conditions look good, Terry. We think you ought to be there," and you went. Did you not wonder what he was up to behind the scenes?
Well,
Did you not?
May
did
I
you
just
not
come back on that?
Mm.
That isn't necessarily the case, you see.
Mm.
I happened to be in Jordan on other business at the time of David Jacobson's release. And I'd been tipped off by sources other than American sources that a release was imminent. Now, I didn't know whether it was going to be at the time when I was in Jordan, but I was fully prepared for that. And when David was released, I got the news in Jordan and immediately decided that I'd get across to Damascus to be there. That was not at the prompting of the Americans or anybody. That was my decision. I actually phoned the White House and told them of the release, and Colonel North did not know of it at that point.
But on other occasions, he clearly, in retrospect, was orchestrating things along this Iran-Contra affair. Did you feel then, do you feel now, that you were manipulated?
Yeah.
By Colonel
Oh,
North?
yes. Oh, yes. I think there's certainly truth in that. I think there was a certain amount of use there. I think that's quite clear. And that's, again, a risk one took, and that's that.
Because administration officials who were involved then say now, admit now, that they were using you as what they described as ecclesiastical cover, as gift wrapping to disguise, if you like, the operation, which was itself illegal even in American law. How do you, as an envoy of the Anglican Church, feel now about the way you were used?
I have absolutely no regrets about doing what I could as a member of the church for the hostages and their families. I believe, I know, all of us acted with complete and absolute integrity throughout. There's absolutely no question of it. So that categorically, that's the first thing. Secondly, in this world, there are all sorts of snares. You cannot work in this world without running into some difficulty or danger. I regret that this happened. I regret it. I don't think it was good. I think it was wrong. However, I will take the responsibility for what I did. And I'm not going to blame other people for my captivity or for my problems. I went back knowing full well the risks I was taking in respect of the hostages and in respect of possibly being captured. And I take that.
They tried to involve you more deeply. There have been several reports that it was suggested to you that you carry with you a bugging device so that your whereabouts could be traced. Did they?
I do believe, in fact, and I've been, scratching my memory in the last weeks, remember, I do believe a suggestion was made by someone, and I immediately said, absolutely no way am I going to touch that, and the matter was dropped. And of course, as I indicated earlier in this interview, had I had anything like that on me, after such a rigorous examination when I would see it, I can tell you I would be a dead man today.
In November '86, it all started to come out, the Iran-Contra affair, first in the Beirut newspaper, and then subsequently elsewhere. The arms for Iran, the role of Colonel North, your name was raised. Your motives were questioned, your position to a degree compromised, and you were described, I think, before your capture, as a pawn in the affair. Why did you take that fateful decision to go back to Beirut?
A number of reasons, I think. One, Terry Anderson, together with other hostages, had made a written appeal for our help. That's the help of the church. That had come out to us way back, long before I knew North and others. Two, the Presbyterian Church had appealed to us for help. Three, the families of the hostages, Colette, the McCarthys and others, and the Americans, had all been in contact. When all that Irangate business broke, the political rug, one might say, was pulled from under my feet. There I was, alone, really. I felt very much alone, very, very vulnerable. But I thought, I am not, at this point, going to add to the despair of the hostages and their families by pulling out now. I'm going to go back, I am going to face the captors, and I'm going to say to the captors, look, we kept our part of the bargain with you. We did the straight and honest dealing, and at this time of crisis, we're prepared to pick up and keep going. There was always a chance that it may have been possible to retrieve the situation, to salvage it, when it appeared to have collapsed in that way as the Americans caused it to collapse.
Was there also an element of proving your innocence and independence?
Oh, undoubtedly. I think there was that element in it. I think I was concerned that it's not just my personal reputation, honestly. It is the reputation and integrity of the church. And the church will not have dealings in arms. It doesn't do that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to descend to that level. And there was a deep desire. Even if it cost me my life, I would defend that principle. I'm no great hero, you know. I've got my weaknesses, but there are certain points where I will stick. And I stick when it comes to that sort of integrity. I stick there.
Now you're home, what price are you continuing to pay? What physical and mental scars has your ordeal left with you?
Oh, and there's chained to a wall for a number of years doesn't do much for muscle tone. You know, one's lost a bit of that. I was very sick with a bronchial condition, which meant that I lost about 30% capacity of my lungs at one time. Fortunately, that's restoring thanks to the remarkably good medical treatment at Lynham. Psychological scars, I don't think they're bad at all. I think I've been considerably deepened by the experience. I have been determined in captivity, and still am determined, to convert this experience into something that will be useful and good for other people. I think that's the way to approach suffering. It seems to me that Christianity doesn't in any way lessen suffering. What it does is enable you to take it, to face it, to work through it, and eventually to convert it.
Does the fact that you actually carry around with you some souvenirs of your ordeal, is that a help to come into terms with it? You carry your blindfold around with you, don't you?
Well, I don't normally, and this is a strange coincidence. It happened to be in my pocket. I mean, I think it's still here. It is. This is not staged.
No.
It is just something that I happened to discover this morning. This blindfold was the one that I wore for years. I had to wear this.
Sort of wrapped.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
I had to put that on every time someone came in the room. It is the one. I mean, I shouldn't have it really. It just happened to be in my pocket when I was released, and I came away with it. Normally, it would be kept behind. And that is the old chip. You know, I can hardly look at these things without put them away. That's the reading glass that I had to read when I could get books.
You can get all the books you want now. What does the future hold for you?
Oh, I've learned a tremendous amount. I have found that my sympathies for those who suffer are, whoever they may be, have been deepened. And I think of the Human Shield hostages, some of whom have not been able to benefit in the way that John and Jackie and I have been able to benefit from the excellent counselling help at Lynham that we've received. I think of them with great concern and compassion. I think of particularly of the victims of terrorism, people in Northern Ireland and others who've suffered so much, and in the Middle East, of course, all round, in all the communities. And my experience will be definitely converted and used to work for those who suffer and to continue to work for justice. By no means have I been deviated. I have actually been strongly confirmed in the line that I was taking before. absolutely strongly confirmed.
Finally, when your captors eventually got round to letting you go at that moment after holding you like an animal for a long part of your period in captivity, they said they were sorry. It had all been a mistake. What was your reaction to that?
I could accept it. I could accept that. I could accept that. They said to me, we're sorry. And they said, what else could we do? We were trapped. We were caught. What else could we do? I said, there are a lot of things you can do. You can use your brains. You can use your persuasive powers. You can try and get people on your side to see where you are suffering injustice. And I also said, look, terrorism, be it terrorism in the Middle East, or be it terrorism in this country, or Northern Ireland, or wherever, is a very, very short-term gain. In fact, it's a long-term loss for those who practice it. And I'll tell you why. Because those who perpetrate injustice on the innocent eventually lose their moral strength, and they wither and die. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't something in the cause that they're following. But find useful means, reasonable means, just means of pursuing your cause. By far the best way. It takes longer, but it'll be more wholesome, and it'll mean that that those who are following the cause will not be sapped and emptied by the destructive force of terrorism.
Terry Waite, thank you. Have a happy Christmas.